Hi everyone, my name is Anastasia Bezverha and I'm a communication specialist from Ukraine. I study narratives and I conduct communication trainings about how narratives impact our values and attitudes about important things in life. Welcome to the session on effective communications in human rights. Today you will find out what is an effective communication and why do we need a coherent communication strategy to reach our goals. How to communicate your main cause and what is it the hope-based communications. How to communicate your cause effectively using stories, figures and expert opinions. I hope this knowledge will help you and your organizations to share your values and your vision to as many people as you want. You will become visible, you will learn how to tailor your messages and to create a positive impact about things we all are striving for. Good communication is not about saying what is popular, but rather making popular what needs to be said. It's a great statement by Anat Schenker-Osorio, which speaks to the main goal of effective communication, which is providing solutions to serious problems, giving answers to tough questions, and giving people hope for a better future. In other words, effective communication is about choosing the best out of available means and channels of communication to reach to your target audience and speaking to them about what is important to you. We can do many things. We can persuade decision makers at the local, national, or even international levels to change norms and regulations. We can raise awareness or educate average citizens about certain spheres. We can launch a fundraising campaign. We can call people for the street actions. We can do many things, but all of that needs well thought and structured communication. Each time, it is important to remember that first, you have to provide people with information about your cause. Then, you have to change their attitudes. And then, you can encourage them to take action. For human rights activists, communication is always about communication of values. Values of human rights, dignity and support. It is more important to create your own narratives, and your own communication is much more important than to react to the narratives of others, particularly by your opponents. That's why your communication has to have specific and well-defined goals. Developing an effective communication strategy includes answers to the following questions. What is it that you're trying to change? What are your advocacy goals? What are problems you're trying to solve? As in any advocacy strategy, in communication strategy, defining your goals is also crucial. Without a clear and understood goal, you can lose sight of what you're trying to do. After you have defined your goal, you also have to set up your objectives. Objectives are specific steps towards your goal. You will see if you invest time in defining your objectives, it will be much easier for you to develop the whole communication strategy. But remember, your objectives have to be SMART. It means that they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, result-oriented, and time-bound. So, who are the groups you want to influence? Who can help you to make this change happen? These are your target groups, people you want to engage in your communication. At first, you have to learn as much as you can about these people. Who are they? What are their interests? What is important for them? What do they do? Where do they live? Where do they take their daily information from? How can you influence and what people can persuade them? This can help you a lot while developing a reach-out strategy for each of your target groups. So, what is it that you want to tell to your audience? What is your key message? Key message is not a slogan. It's a concise statement which is built on your communication goal. It includes information about what is important to you, what do you want to change, and which solutions you're offering. Remember that your messages have to be very clear and understood by your audience. Try to avoid complicated terms and use simple words of explanation. For For each campaign, activists develop one general key message and then tailor specific messages and arguments to meet the needs of each of the audiences you selected to influence. At the end, you can develop a message box which looks like the one on the screen. So, who will be your speakers? Having studied interests and needs of your target groups, you can find out who are the suitable figures who can address directly to representatives of your group. Obviously, doctors can speak better to other doctors, famous rapper can appeal to young people, and head of local administration could speak to local MPs. Choose your speakers strategically. Here you can see famous Ukrainian strongman Vasyl Verestyuk is calling on other men to stand against gender-based violence. And last but not least, what will be the communication channels? In other words, how will your target audience get your message from you or your speakers? They will read it on social media? They will hear it on TV at an evening talk show? Or they will see it on a billboard while walking down the street? All these communication channels have their own audiences. They are more or less expensive, so you have to carefully consider your options. The key point here is to maximize your efforts and use available resources creatively to make your target audience pay attention to your message. When we develop a communication strategy, we move in a circle, because each time you create activities, you have to make evaluation and measure your efficiency. But if you see you're not reaching your communication objectives or your message is not clear, you have to make changes and start over again till you see that you're reaching your audience and you get the response from them as you initially planned. Hope-based communication is an approach to social communication, which is proven to be effective for human rights activists. Here are 5 important principles to follow. Always tell people what you're fighting for, not against. Each organization has a long list of bad, sometimes horrible things they are opposing and trying to change, but instead try to transform all your public argumentation and rhetoric from the negative to the positive. For instance, instead of saying you're fighting against corruption, you can say you're fighting for accountability and rule of law for everyone. Instead of protesting against the violation of women's rights, say you're fighting for freedom of choice and access, equal access for all women and girls. Take your time to critically reconsider all your public rhetoric and try to change it towards the positive narrative. Stress on the vision of the common future you're advocating for, as well as communicate solutions you're offering. Be proactive, not reactive. The idea is to communicate stories which add to your own narrative, rather than react to your opponent's actions or frames. When trying to persuade your target audience, try to find stories which speak about your values and about your vision. Try to avoid reproducing negative stereotypes or concepts. Try to avoid popular stereotypes and cliches which downgrade the people you try to support and protect. For instance, instead of using the concept of Fortress Europe as a region which is closed to migrants, try to focus on situations and cases where people welcomed migrants, or describe migration as an integral part of human behavior. By this, you add to long-term creation of ideas and change of attitudes and behaviors we all try to achieve. Try to build positive relations and be inclusive. Positive and inclusive messages tend to be more effective than the negative ones. People in your audience need examples they can relate to. They want to feel social connection to your cause. Women who saw body-positive advertisements mentioned earlier in the survey that they witnessed greater diversity and freedom in these ads, and it makes themselves feel more self-confident and happy. Your draft law was adopted in the first reading, your audience has to know about it. Reach 10,000 people by your petition, communicate widely. Gathered enough donations to help one child or one family, but planning to help 100, still you made a small but significant change in people's lives, and you really have to spread the word about it. Small victories serve as a powerful drive of motivation for your audience to join you and to help you. People want to be part of something which has real impact. Hope-based communications is a proven effective approach, which in the long-term perspective will help you to build powerful and effective network of supporters. It will help you to establish values of freedom, dignity and support, rather than threat and fear. So, how to communicate your values? You have to be aware that most values human rights activists are communicating, such as freedom, justice or dignity, are so-called contested concepts. It means that they mean different things to different people. It means if you do not clearly frame your messages, your audiences may use frames of their own, and it may mean that your message may not get through. For this purpose, create a clear picture of how it looks like in practice when your values are applied. You can relate to lived experiences of your audiences and to create common visions of the future to share your values. How do we communicate our main cause? All organizations who work for decades in their fields become experts and accumulate loads of information, data, arguments pro and against certain things. But the point is that you often communicate to people who know very little about your cause, and besides, they have dozens of other activities going on. So, if you imagine your complicated topic as a map of London Metro, do not try to communicate all of that at once, but rather focus on one line. Personalize your communication. Your main message should contain information, data and words, which is familiar to your audience, things they can easily relate to. Besides of the expert opinions and arguments and solutions you're offering, use personal stories to bring out emotions, which your audience can relate to. Prisoner's Voice, Ukrainian campaign which advocates for release of all political prisoners of Kremlin, uses quotation of family members to portray each of the prisoner. Data and research findings are invaluable sources of information for all non-governmental organizations. Data is used as an evidence, as an argument, and as an illustration to the problem you're trying to solve. For instance, an interesting case in the debate for and against coronavirus pandemic happened in the US. One US group was skeptical about coronavirus pandemic and used an argument that homeless people who do not follow social distancing, do not use masks, and do not get access to healthcare are not getting infected. But later on, CDC, US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, filed a report where it stated that about 25% of all homeless people in major shelters of San Francisco, Boston, and other big US cities were tested positive for coronavirus. In case you have conducted your own research or gathered your data, use your data wisely. Explain why your findings are important, how do they support your key arguments, and describe and explain your figures using infographic. Where possible, put your data in visual context. This will help you to explain the importance of the figures you provide. For instance, you have found out that the pollution rate today has reached 215 points. But you will never know how bad it is for you and your health till you will look at the map, where you will see that the normal pollution rate is 40-50 points. At the same map, you can also compare position of Ukraine against other polluted countries or cities. To end up, here are 5 important principles of effective communication. So, first principle, Always develop a clear communication strategy to promote your own agenda. Create your own narrative based on your own values. Second principle, focus on the positive changes and create vision of common future you would like to achieve. Provide your audience with possibilities to join your movement. Organize activities which can accommodate different groups. Third principle, always explain complicated terms. Provide illustrations and personal stories your audience can relate to. Fourth principle, communicate your main message using simple words which can be easily understood and repeated by your supporters. Fifth principle, do not hesitate to evaluate your activities and change your approach when you see that your impact is not enough. Because strategy is not something carved in stone, but an everyday activity. Strategy without a process is nothing but a wish list. Thank you.